Good afternoon and welcome to HCRF Talks COVID with Dr. Platanias. This is session 7 with Dr. Platanias, and today we have a special guest joining us, Dr. Frank Eckerdt, Ph.D. and cancer researcher, a professor at the Lurie Comprehensive Cancer Center. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Thank you so much for having me.
Many of you will remember Dr. Eckerdt from our gala when he was recognized for his outstanding progress in brain cancer. Today, we know that the fight against COVID is not over. Dr. Platanias and his Northwestern team of researchers are at the forefront of COVID research. We're delighted to have Frank here with us to share his studies about molecules that target receptors to block the coronavirus and potentially provide a treatment for COVID. So we look forward to hearing about those studies, Dr. Eckerdt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. Yeah, so, yeah.
No, I was going to say maybe, so you want Frank to give an overview of what, or should we do it by questions to Frank?
I think he should. To excite us a little bit during this pressing times.
Yeah, and then we can ask questions. Okay, yeah, sounds good.
So we're actually trying to target this disease, COVID-19, on two different levels. One is, some of you might have heard of it, is the cytokine storm. And that is pretty much what is detrimental and kills a lot of people with severe COVID-19 symptoms. So this cytokine storm is pretty much when your immune system gets completely out of control. And we believe it has to do with an imbalance of interferon signaling, which the virus is actually totally knocking down, and cytokine signaling. And we believe that the virus is targeting the interferon.
Frank, do you want to explain what is interferon? What is interferon? What is interferon signaling? People don't know that.
Sorry, yeah. So interferon.
We're not doctors. Did you forget?
Yeah, sorry. Interferons are signaling molecules, also cytokines, that can be produced and secreted by cells that are infected, and then they trigger immune responses. So they work from one cell to neighboring cells, but also all over the body. They're like messenger molecules.
And what do they do? What do they fight?
They fight viral infection. I'm sorry, yeah. So they are.
And what else? And cancer cells, right?
And cancer too. We're working on that too. Yeah. So what the virus is doing, so interferons are the first response of an infected cell and of our immune system to viral infection. And it helps to fight the virus. But what this virus, these coronavirus are doing, when they enter the cell, they selectively completely shut down the production of interferons. So the cell is not going to be capable of communicating to neighboring cells, I'm infected, watch out. But there's always has to be a level between interferons and other cytokines. And so what happens in these people with a cytokine storm, with severe COVID-19 symptoms, what we believe is due to the lack of interferons, now in some of these patients, the immune system is now trying to overcompensate by hyperactivating other cytokines, and that's what we call the cytokine storm. So Leon's friend and colleague, Eleanor Fish, she actually was on the front line in Wuhan, and she treated people with doses of type 1 interferons. And what she found is that people who got interferon treatment did not develop a cytokine storm. So when I saw these data, I have to say that was breathtaking, because that could really help us ameliorate the severe COVID-19 symptoms. Now, as always, nothing is always straightforward and simple in research. And what we found out was that interferon administration is unfortunately also increasing the production of ACE2, the angiotensin II receptor. And this is, as to say, the doorway the virus uses to enter cells. This is the receptor the virus binds to, docks on, and it uses this receptor to enter the cell, to infect the cell, and then replicate and to flood other cells and the body.
So this is a blocker, in other words?
Sorry, a what?
It's a blocker, so it blocks?
So this is actually the door for the virus. And when we administer interferon, we fight the cytokine storm, but we might increase the abundance of the door, or we might even open the door a tiny little bit. So what we're trying to do is, sorry?
I was going to say, to make it simple, this virus is so smart that if you can imagine, there are guards in our body, and that's the interferons. And the virus goes and takes out the guards. You know, that's what it does, shuts down the interferon response, and then gets in the cell and start doing other things. So it's like, it's a very unusual thing that we don't see normally with viruses, but I will imagine it like this. Interferon is the guardian of our system, and the virus is smart and goes and takes out the guardians before it goes in and start the job.
So besides using interferon to fight the symptoms of COVID-19, we're also trying to fight the production of this receptor, which is technically the doorway for the virus to enter the cells. And so we have some very interesting preliminary results where we identify the pathways that are actually responsible for inducing ACE2 production. And we have now a few inhibitors and pathways that we identified that we can shut down by using drugs that we already use in the lab to fight cancer. And we're hoping to repurpose those drugs now to shut down production of the virus, and thereby slamming the door into the virus face and closing the door for the virus to infect other cells. So I know maybe I went a little bit too much into details. So if you have any questions, or you feel there's something I did not explain in good terms, please let me know, and I will try my best to help you to explain this a little better. Okay.
Doctor, my wife is a very generous person, and she was so impressed with the work that you were doing on brain cancer.
Thank you.
She put together a package for you. She took some stuff out, preserved it, put it in a container, and shipped it to you. And your folks returned it and said, "There's nothing in here." Those were my brains, by the way. And apparently they weren't useful to you in research. But I wanted to ask you about monoclonal antibodies, because monoclonal antibodies are, they factor into the immune system and the virus, but they're also something that has been, it's revolutionized cancer treatment in many respects. One I'm most familiar with, of course, is Rituxan or rituximab for lymphoma. Could you explain a little bit how they work and their promise for future use for cancer, and if applicable for viruses?
Yes, it is. It absolutely is, with some drawbacks. So antibodies are immune globulins that our B cells and T cells produce, and then those who ever match, for instance, a virus.
What are B cells and T cells, Frank? Is immune cells.
Immune cells.
Make it simple, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, you're right. So antibodies are naturally produced by cells of our immune system. And so we have a huge variety of different antibodies and the representing cells. And whenever an antibody finds something, binds to something that it recognizes as, oh, this is not part of this body, this is not part of this human being, it actually activates the immune system. But it also binds to, let's say, a virus. It can bind to the virus, and thereby it inhibits virus function. It is like putting the brakes, it is like putting a huge weight on the virus, and now it can no longer move around and infect other cells. So the antibody is doing two things. It helps our immune system to recognize what is foreign. It helps it to inactivate it, and actually a third thing, and then it activates other immune cells that are then coming together and try to kill whatever the virus, the antibody binds to. Now, your question was also how this can be used for the virus. So we use this for cancer therapeutics, for instance, leukemia, by using those antibodies that we produce in the laboratory, and we can apply those to those patients, and these antibodies will selectively bind to the cancer cells in their blood, but not to the healthy B cells. And thereby we actually inhibit those cancer cells, and also we activate the immune system to destroy these particular cancer cells, whereas other blood cells are don't get attacked. Now we can repurpose those antibodies to make them specific for the virus. And you probably have heard what's also in the news as like a first line of therapy. If you have a patient that overcame the virus and became resistant, we can actually isolate these antibodies from the immunized patient and give them to a sick patient, and that will also block the virus and help this patient to build up its own immune response.
Let me ask you a question.
May I add something here, because I think that's relevant to the virus. So the antibodies, and there is a talk, because that's what the serum, convalescent serum that we give, they take it from patients who recovered from COVID, and they give, what they give is antibodies. But we don't know, we know it has activity, but there are also other mechanisms of the immune system to fight the virus beyond the antibodies. There are T cells. So we don't understand exactly how this virus is fought. We know the antibodies is part of the response, but what is very interesting, and I learned that earlier in the week, the cancer center directors over the country had a Zoom meeting as we are now with Dr. Fauci. And we spent an hour talking with him, and he said something that is really concerning, that with time, the antibody levels of some responding patients may be going down, meaning that the immune response may not be long lasting. These are things that we will understand. Right now, we assume anyone who gets infected will be forever, protected. That's not necessarily correct. The antibodies may not last forever. So it's very complicated, the whole thing. And only a vaccine will give a final answer, I think, to this situation. This swine flu thing will not happen. This is just a risk at this moment, that it could be another pandemic, but hopefully it will not happen. If it happens, it's going to be devastating, because you're going to have together the coronavirus plus that. Personally, if you ask me, I don't think it's going to happen. But I think people discuss it this moment because they're going to think of the worst case scenario. So I personally don't think that's swine flu. I know there is a potential there. Again, that's another virus in China in this that goes to humans, but hopefully it will not happen. I personally don't think it will happen, but if it happens, it will make things much worse than what we are now. So I know it's
actually, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to ask, is this something that's actually has occurred in China? And because I know in September, October, November, whatever, people were saying, it never happened here.
Right. No, it has not. You see, there is a virus this moment, but it's not in humans. The risk is that these viruses can jump from animals to humans. This has not happened, but there is the fear out there. And because of what happened with COVID, people are paranoid. I don't think this is going to happen, but it may, but I could be totally wrong.
I don't know that there is a way adequately to prepare for something like this, but we certainly weren't prepared. Most of the world wasn't prepared. What lessons are we learning from this pandemic to protect us against future ones in terms of travel, border, sufficient personal protective gear, those sorts of things? What are we doing? What do we need to do as a country and healthcare system to prevent or to respond to future pandemics?
That's a loaded question. Frank, why don't you take it? So,
no. I would say first of all, we have to be honest, and we cannot play political games when lives are at stake.
Bravo.
Okay, that's the first thing. There were a lot of political games, whatever country we talk about, and it delayed an adequate response. And I think we learned, that's what I meant was we all learned from it. In order to have an adequate response, we cannot lie. We have to work together, and we will be and we have to tell all the people the truth, if they like it or not, so that everybody can make an educated decision, politicians and your neighbor, and your parents and your children. We do live in a globalized world. Personally, I think travel restrictions are helpful at some point, but they cannot really prevent this. They can only delay this. So if we put in travel restriction or something, then please use the time you just bought and don't let it go to waste. Those are the things. I think honesty, keep politics out of it. Of course, politicians, I mean, I want to be clear about one thing. The job for a scientist is, the way I see it, that we provide the best information possible. And it might not always, we never talk about, I have proof for something. I can only say I have evidence, or I have very strong evidence. We don't talk in these terms. And then with whatever strong or compelling evidence we provide the politicians with, the politicians have to make the right decisions. That's why they are in office. We only provide the knowledge as best as we can, and then politicians should make the right decision.
So along those same lines, a couple of weeks ago when we had Dr. Eleanor Fish, I said to Dr. Platanias and Dr. Fish, I said, why is COVID worse than SARS and these other things? And it left an impression, Dr. Platanias' response left an impression in me, and Dr. Fish said to me, this is not more deadly than those. In fact, SARS is more deadly, is more infectious. So what does that tell us? It tells us that something happened where we weren't on top of it, right? Because SARS was able to be contained at the time. Having a pandemic isn't new. There's been Ebola, there's been all these things, but I think, you know, Dr. Platanias has educated us about the response, right?
I think,
but you know, Nicole, the difference is also that this virus is much more infectious than SARS. So SARS were more deadly, but
okay.
This virus is much more infectious. I think there are some very serious mistakes that have happened in the whole Western world, not just here. And one thing is that the one mistake that is very obvious is the masks. If you go at the beginning, if we go in February and March, everybody, including Dr. Fauci, who I really respect, and I think he's right, but everybody was saying, you don't need to wear a mask unless you are infected. Now, retrospectively, Fauci just said they were saying that because they didn't have masks in the stockpile and they wanted to protect the hospitals, you know. They wanted the doctors to have masks to do their job. And that was, because it didn't make sense to me then. Why are they saying you don't need to wear a mask? I thought we should wear masks from that moment. And then the Surgeon General was saying the same, masks don't protect. Well, then it changed. Masks protect. What changed is that there were more masks in the market.
And one of the things that we appreciate about you and your team is that you are first and foremost scientists. And what you do and what you do for all of us is absolutely incredible. And the fact that you want to stay away from politics is even more to your credit, because when you do what some of the doctors have done, and not just those that are part of the task force, but to go on the various stations, once you start getting into the political battlefield, you rightfully or wrongfully, you lose credibility on the medical issues. And so when you said that science should be left to scientists, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's easier said than done, because you see some of the studies like Lancet, respected publication, publishes something that's not correct. There's a lot more art in science than a lot of people would realize.
But that's a very good point. The problem with the Lancet paper, though, is again that someone twists this politically too. In science, we see wrong papers all the time that sometimes get retracted. That doesn't mean that the authors there had a political agenda. That was another thing that was done the wrong way. The authors just published the paper. This was a group from the VA. These are VA doctors, I know them. They just went and published it. Now, it happened not to be a fit in one view, and all of a sudden they get accused of driving a political agenda. And that's when that's why it's so terrible when politics is mixed with science.
Yeah.
Science has, the virus has no political affiliation. The drugs have no political affiliation. They don't care, We should let the science completely separate from politicians. And I agree completely with you. Scientists have no place in politics. All they have to do is do their job, do the science. Unfortunately, here, we have had a mix that was very toxic, you know, and hopefully it will not happen again, no matter, because it's not right. It doesn't help anyone. We agree completely on that, so.
Dr.
I wanted
Platanias.
to ask Dr. Frank something following up, because it sounds like what we're hearing on now, maybe 2 or 3 of these calls, is the great promise of interferons. And we talked about this in some detail with Dr. Fish, and Dr. Platanias answered a bunch of my questions, because my main concern and my proposition is that, you know, interferons are going to be a hard sell because of their toxicity when they've been used in other forums, including, for example, for melanoma. And I understand that the dosage would be different for virus, but how do we counter medically toxicity issues with interferon?
Well, first of all, it's going to be a short-term treatment, right? I mean, there's a lot of drugs out there that have very negative side effects if you consume them over a long period of time. But we think here, interferon treatment is only going to be helpful for people with more severe COVID-19 symptoms. People that don't develop the cytokine storm may not even need it. So short-term is the first thing I would say. Can I exclude any kind of side effects? No, of course not. But I would think that a short-term and the appropriate dose, it should be very beneficial, as long as we don't have anything better. There might be like the steroid dexamethasone that's on the horizon now that has a similar effect. So there is more and more options coming our way that are hopeful. If I can pick up on...
Let me just, for the interferon though, because I'm not so sure I agree with you, Frank, on this.
Okay.
Although I'm a big interferon fan, and we had Dr. Fish, who is my good friend, and she's a big interferon person, I personally agree with the question. Is the drug is toxic, and there is some activity described, but I don't think this will be the answer to COVID. I think, although there have been some studies, because exactly what you mentioned, because of the toxicity, it will not be used. You know, there are many people who are resistant to interferon, and I understand them why. So I will not hold my breath that interferon will be a real way to treat COVID. We need differently. We need either the antibodies or a new drug. We don't have a good drug this one. Remdesivir works a little bit, but it's not a good drug either. And, you know, or a vaccine. So in reality, the only good thing we have is masks, believe it or not. That's the best way to slow down the virus. And we don't have good drugs, you know.
How about the vaccines that are starting at the University of Illinois next Thursday?
Yeah, and we're starting here trials too. I mean, many places do.
But U of I, they're saying all over the news, I mean, even World News said it, that next Thursday, they will be injecting over 900 people that have already signed up, and many more with this new vaccine that's very promising. So what do you guys think about that?
So these are big trials that involve many places. In Chicago happens to be, for that particular one that has another 300 places, U of I. These are early trials. They don't mean any. We don't know at this moment, and there will be a lot of those. But you know, this moment we don't have evidence that they work. It's all theoretical thing based on laboratory stuff.
But how can we not have evidence that it's going to work? How can people get on these trials if there's no evidence that this drug works?
That's how, you know, there is evidence that it may do some things in the lab, and then you move, you know, to humans. But we don't know if this vaccine will end up being something that will really work. In China, what Fauci said, which is, I don't know, I don't think that's a secret, but he said in the meeting that in China, the Chinese military has a vaccine that they give it now to every single soldier in the Chinese army. But that's not necessarily a good idea, because they don't know if the vaccine works and the long-term toxicities. They know that it produces the antibody. It creates the antibody. That doesn't mean, though, that it will protect them from the virus. Well, they don't know that yet.
You know
So
what, Dr. Platanias, when you hear of so many people dropping dead, I'm an advocate for trials. I mean, my mother was dead. She was dead, you know that. I mean, after 3 months of chemos and 3 months of isolation, you created that drug. You gave her that trial. You know what? And it worked. If it wasn't for this trial, for her to have taken it, she would have been dead at 66 years old. So what is it? Do you bite the bullet and say, you know what?
yeah,
I'll take the vaccine, and if it works, it works. It's better than me losing my life.
you're absolutely right. I agree
Where's
with
the
you.
double edge? You know, it's like,
I agree 100% with you, Elani. We need trials. The mistake is when people, without having the results of the trials, when you do the trial and people do well, you know it works. But sometimes people go and say, oh, this thing works before the trial has even started, you know. And I've seen that there was a company in Israel a year and a half ago, and you and I were talking about it, that came out and said, we're going to cure all cancers within a year. Do you remember? And you called me that day.
I remember.
And you told me, what is this? What's going on? And I said, don't believe this. You know, that's not, you know, so the stock went up like this. Not a single person has been treated, you know? What?
Yeah, but there was a hoax from a man that wanted to create his own
Exactly.
empire
That's
and get money.
yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
talking about serious hospitals right now that are doing this, you know, trials.
Oh,
So
yeah. Including with you.
I'm just asking the question, you know, and going back to my mother, you know, if she had not been in this trial, she would not have gained 18 years of life. So what is it that makes this different?
I can answer that.
Go ahead, please.
Frank, please.
What is different? Why are we not all enthusiastic about the next vaccine? Because what we're talking about here is a relatively novel, completely new strategy of making a vaccine. All the experience we have with our flu vaccine, we have with pneumonia vaccine, we have with other vaccines, do not apply to this new technology. If we were creating a vaccine according to the old conventional standards, we would need a few years if we get lucky. This is a completely new methodology that is fortunately not based on DNA, but now based on RNA molecules that get injected in the body, and then the body makes the own viral protein, and then after that, the body makes its own antibodies. And this is why most researchers are cautiously optimistic, but the caution is still very big because we don't know enough about this new technique of producing a vaccine.
So Dr. Eckerdt, why is there the need to use that new technology for this virus?
Time. The old way is going to take several years and we don't have time.
But it's also innovation too. That's the good thing, that people go out of their ways, thinking outside the box. And that's a completely different way to create a vaccine. It's very innovative, but nobody knows if it's going to work. But it's moving fast right now. People want to do it. So one thing, Frank, I don't think you mentioned enough of your research.
Yeah.
One thing that, you see, one thing Frank is doing is we know that there is, you know, there is a receptor. The virus has something that uses to enter the cell, to goes and hits, a spike.
Spike.
Yeah. So what Frank is doing is we're trying, because we know how this receptor is regulated. It's regulated via the interferon response again. We keep using interferon. And that's an area that we've been working for a long time. And Frank has been working with major results in cancer. So we have now, using drugs that we were originally planning to use for cancer, to see if we can shut down this spike, you know. And he has a couple of candidates. I hope the results keep consistent, that seem to block this receptor, and that will be a big deal. Then there is a drug that blocks the receptor, right? You want to explain that, Frank?
So yeah, we have this drug that was developed against a protein kinase. It's also part of the interferon pathway. And we have tested this drug in different cells. We have tested this drug in primary cells of the lung. We have tested this drug in primary cells of the endothelial, which are the blood vessels. And consistently in all our experiments, this drug reduces the expression of the receptor, ACE2, that the virus uses to get in, using its spike protein to dock onto the ACE2.
Is that a kinase inhibitor?
It is.
Yes.
Dr. Frank, make sure you stay healthy. Make sure you stay away from everyone that has COVID, because we need you to
Thanks
create
again.
this
Thanks
vaccine.
again.
I'll get you more masks. You don't have to worry.
Well,
I'll get you sanitizers. I'll get you whatever you need. Just
Yeah,
okay.
create that work very hard for this vaccine. That is wonderful. Can I ask you a question, please?
Yes.
Have you tested this on any patients?
No, we don't have the means to test this on COVID patients right now. But what I can say is we tested different primary cells that we know the virus uses to infect the body and to cause COVID-19. And it works in all these different cellular scenarios. So we're still at the beginning of this research.
Can I ask you a question about the immune system? I know that you're probably learning more things about the immune system with this virus because it's like nothing else you've seen. So are you doing research on the immune system and how it's being attacked and what we need to do with the immune system to make it stronger, and how this is affecting the immune system in general that you've never seen before?
Leon might be, Dr. Platanias might be the better expert to answer that question. But so far, I would say we don't have, the virus is, as to my knowledge, not directly attacking cells of the immune system. There is some evidence that it can enter T lymphocytes, I think, but it cannot multiply in those so far. And that's, I mean, maybe there's something new coming out that I haven't heard yet. The virus is not attacking the immune cells, I should say, per se, but it is causing an imbalance in the immune response that in some patients only, and others not at all. Mm-hmm. In some patients causes these severe COVID-19 disease, sickness.
Actually, you know, Frank, there is a paper we have in press that is on the clinical effects of COVID and will be published soon, and then I can send it to you. But we reviewed all the literature about the effects of the virus on the blood. And the virus causes what we call severe lymphopenia. Some patients have very decreased cells of the immune system, lymphocytes. So although at the beginning, as Frank says, the virus doesn't get in there, at some point it shuts down the immune system. So it does. In severe cases of COVID where people die, in fact, the prognostic factor is this lymphopenia. You see the lymphocytes in the blood go to very low levels, and these are the patients who die, actually. So we know that it does. We don't know exactly how it affects the immune system, but it definitely causes serious damage to the immune system. And we try to understand the steps. But this virus is very different than anything we have seen. It affects the coagulation, the blood vessels that Frank mentioned. It causes clotting and strokes in young people. It does some very unusual stuff. But the immune system is clearly one of the effects that it has, the serious one.
So, well, the lymph section of the body takes all the waste and everything out of the body. So,
right.
So if it's affecting the lymph, then the body can't release the toxins and everything. So that's really how it's happening.
In some ways, I mean, that's a little, it's a little more complicated than this. But we also know with some other viruses that cause, that can, when they get very serious infections, you get the immune system shutting down. It's not the only virus that does this, but it's just that here we have an unusual combination of many things that this virus does that I have never seen in any other virus, so much stuff together. And that's the challenge with this thing,
Why
is the inflammatory effect greater in this virus?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think so. And that's what you see with the flu. There are some people who die from the flu every year. But here, the difference is even in people who are asymptomatic. That's another thing we're talking. If you go and you do, and they are positive for COVID, but if you go and you do a CAT scan of their lungs, you see there is lung damage, They just have more capacity and they don't sense the damage yet.
Mhm.
We don't know what will happen to these people 2 or 3 or 4 years later. It could be that they thought they had a very light form of COVID and they are young and they don't feel anything, but 3 or 4 years, the damage may, show. So all this is an inflammatory response. This effects on the lungs, this ARDS, this infiltrates, this is the inflammatory response, but it's very hard and there are now some drugs that we know they work. One is the dexamethasone, which is not a big news. We knew it works for inflammatory in the lung. Now people tried it in COVID. Then there is this Greek drug. There is some trials that they have done in Greece with colchicine, which is a drug for gout, and that may have activity too. But we don't understand the way we give these drugs is when things get real bad. Then we just go and give them, trying to reverse the very bad inflammation. We don't know if that should be used earlier. We don't know if it will harm if we use it earlier. Maybe if we use it earlier, we may do more damage. So there are many unanswered things right now that people don't know, but the inflammatory response and the way it happens in the lung is unusual for this specific in many ways, and very bad, very damaging,
One of the, I don't want to be just a guy attacking scientists, or rather the
Please
government. The government. One of the things that
But you know a lot. I have to tell you that. You talk
He's
like
a
a
lawyer,
doctor.
so he has to
I know.
protect
He's
everybody.
really, you are incredibly educated, and it's fun to get difficult questions from you.
No, my wife feeds me the good questions. But one of the things that I think is outstanding in terms of a government response is the fast tracking of trials and medicines, the compassionate use of drugs, even though hydroxy turned out not to be the answer. It allowed doctors to make the call patient by patient. And if it had worked out, it could have, probably saved a bunch of people. And, more to what we're all focused on, cancer, with the right to try. And, so many of us have heard stories about people leaving our country and going different places for all sorts of treatment, Wanback P or whatever it might be, many of which, of course, have no efficacy whatsoever. But what effect do you think the fast tracking, compassionate use, and right to try, what kind of benefits is that giving to scientists and patients?
So, it's very interesting because earlier today and the whole week I have been fighting to get funds to support our compassionate care program. It's the compassionate care, we do that for cancer patients, and we do it here in the cancer center, and it's going rapidly up. We give it more and more. The problem is that this is not considered research, because it's not research usually, and it's not considered clinical care because you need to go through research bureaucracy to give it to a patient. You need FDA regulations and approval. So we always have a hard time how to fund this. That's one of the challenges we have. But the compassionate care, it has to be used correctly. And in order to give to a cancer patient a compassionate care use of drug, which meaning, I think for everyone, that means to give him a drug that is not approved by the FDA, that we don't know it works well for sure, but there is some evidence, some suggestion that it may work. And then because the patients have a very bad disease, we say, let's try it. What do we have to lose? That's the idea there. But you have to be careful what you give in cancer. In COVID, it was one drug, it was hydroxychloroquine. In cancer, there are thousands of drugs out there. And we always need more evidence before we give something like this. Usually, there has to be a clinical trial somewhere else that shows activity, but the drug is not FDA approved, or something like this. So I think it's important for patients. You don't get this access to every hospital because it's complicated. You have to go through a lot of effort to give a compassionate drug. We do it at Northwestern a lot, but it's something that complements what we do. On the other hand, we also have a lot of clinical trials, as Eleni was talking, where we try new things, and some patients may benefit more by being in a clinical trial versus the compassionate care use. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Yeah, this is Jim. Before we run out of time, this is let's say a more practical question. I would like to go to Greece for a wedding a week from Sunday. I haven't flown for since the first week in March. Should I go?
who are you asking, me or Frank?
Either
Frank?
one. Should I
Both of
go?
you.
What are my chances? What am I risking?
How it depends who gets married. Is that family or is
It's
just a friend?
family. It's family. It's rather important. On the other hand, the fact that they didn't cancel it, doesn't make me feel too bad because they realize that they're going to lose a lot of people. They wouldn't ordinarily go. And
Yeah.
I think
Surprised they didn't cancel it, Dimitri. I'm surprised because right now
No, me
Greece,
too. Me too.
they're shutting down a lot of things because my niece, who I think is on, had to cancel hers on the 23rd.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why they didn't cancel it. And now they're telling me that they expect, this is up in status, and they tell me they expect 300 people at the wedding.
I don't
So
think.
my family tells me not to go. Doctor, what do you think?
You might be,
I
safer
will
on the
not-
plane than on the wedding.
Yeah, I think the problem is I personally will not go. If you ask me what I will do, and Eleni knows that because I with her niece. But the problem is when you go on the plane for such a long time, it's 14-hour trip, right?
Yes.
And if there is someone on the plane, you are at risk, and you have to wear a N95 mask the whole time.
Yeah.
Then you have the bathrooms, the one, the other. So I personally will, if you ask me, I cannot advise you what to do.
No,
I will not
appreciate
go. Yeah.
That's all I can ask. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dr.
Zoom
Frank?
might be the answer.
Yeah. That's a good.
Platanias, what do you think about these other states where we're seeing these surge, states that lock down like we did? Look at New York, they were on lockdown the same way we were ahead of time. I mean, not New York, sorry, California. I'm looking at the cases in Chicago or Illinois, and for a while they were around 600, steady. The death rates are going down, but the numbers seem to be going up a little.
Because more people are getting tested. More people are getting tested now than what before.
Well, that's part of it, but it's more than this. First of all, the death rate going down, there are two things here. One is because we know how to treat COVID better, the severe cases, but also because there is a lag phase. I'm looking right now, I wanted to see what's happening to Illinois today. I'm opening, I have some detailed access here. But so the death rate, usually, if you see increasing cases, the number of deaths is going to go up a month later. You may see the death going down, but that's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that a month later may go up, because from the moment people get infected to the moment they die, the ones who will die takes a month. So the death rate, I don't think that means a lot. There is more testing, but there is also more positive cases per test. So the increases are real that we see in California. And I'm looking at Chicago right now. We are still doing well. Illinois still doing well. There is a slight edge coming up, but nothing like Florida or, so we still look good. But the best, state right now, in my opinion, is Massachusetts. If you go and see Massachusetts, was very high.
It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah, don't worry about it. And it has gone down to near zero and stays there. And you know what's the big difference? In Massachusetts, my son is there right now. He has his girlfriend. Everybody wears a mask all the time. This is not happening in Chicago. In Chicago, some people wear, some don't. So I think in California and in Florida and Arizona, where you start seeing where things go really high up, is because the way they open, the rush to open without enforcing masks, strong enforcement of masks. The facts are, you got people together without masks, the virus, will spread. But I don't think it's only that. I think it's because so far, we have seen the states that open earlier, California, Texas, Florida. protests were in many states. They were in Chicago. So we may see this effect in 2 or 3 weeks from now coming up. We may not have seen it yet, but I think what we see, the spikes now that we see in other states, is the way they opened, and they opened, you know, fast and
Of course,
not,
they are, Dr. Platanias, because you cannot shut people for 3
I
months
know.
down.
But
People
give
are
them
losing
masks.
their homes. People are committing suicide. You know, 2 young kids this week, Greek kids, you know, speaking, you know, from our community, you know, committed suicide. So,
Are you serious?
yes. So you know what? You
Oh my
cannot isolate people like animals, because you know then it's like putting an animal in a cage, and once you open the cage, they're all gonna flee, and you know what? They're gonna retaliate and rebel. So you know
Terrible,
what?
terrible.
Everybody keeps talking about locking, but yet they don't see the destruction of what he has done. You know, I keep saying this over and over again. You know, I am so against, you know, everyone's saying, well, we need to lock it down. No, we don't need to lock it down, because it's going to create a bigger monster and more of a disease if we lock down, you know, the states.
Yeah.
We cannot be
And,
locking down countries.
and what can we do about this? The answer is clear. And we see this from our politicians. We can, if we have enough testing, let's say everybody could get tested once a week, which is totally irrational, right? Which is not going to happen. But if everybody could get tested every week, we could immediately and rapidly isolate those people that are infectious in their surroundings, and they don't have to go and we just isolate those people that we know we should isolate those. And you know what? Most of the rest of us could restart our normal life. We don't have to shut down a city. We don't have to shut down a state. We just shut down those people who are infectious, and maybe their surroundings would put in isolation until they have been tested as well. And then we can micromanage. We can dissect this pandemic by targeting where the virus is, and not what right now we're targeting cities and states. That's not efficient. That is not efficient. Why is the discussion of wearing a mask or not, which it's becoming an ideological question? We are not ideologists. We are researchers, and we can only talk and tell people the truth, what is necessary and what helps. And what helps is everybody wearing masks when they're outside or with other people. And what helps is testing for us to identify where we need to act. And then other people can enjoy more freedom.
My
in terms of the freedom, we are,
It should also be mandatory in the buildings, because there's a lot of buildings that don't insist. Your high rises, so many of these buildings are not insisting. Half people are wearing them, half aren't.
Right.
There's a law there that protects, when you drive a car, okay, you have to wear your seatbelt, and we have all learned how to wear a seatbelt.
Another big mistake with the masks is that there is this rumor out there that masks only help others, not you.
Right.
That's how they have been marketing it, and that's wrong. You know, masks help you too. If you wear a KN95, they help you more. If you wear a regular surgical mask, it doesn't help you as much. It's much less, but it still protects you somehow. But the way they said it is wear it to protect others. And the reason for that is because they didn't have enough masks at the beginning, and they wanted only symptomatic people to wear them. Now we know, if you wear masks, you protect others and yourself.
That I think if a scientist like Frank, who everyone respects, and you would get on the news and say, hey, enough is enough. This has got to be made mandatory. And then break it down into very simple terms and just say, because if it doesn't, this is what's going to happen to you. And this is what's going to happen to our country. We need somebody to step up and take responsibility. And the people that should take responsibility is you guys.
Well, maybe
They say that, I think scientists.
You should all get together with all these hundreds of scientists and, you know, researchers that you have to all decide to get on TV or somewhere and talk about it.
If you put a fine in people and you say, you know, there's going to be a fine, the way they say there's going to be a fine if you hold your phone.
Well, you get fined if your seatbelt's not on.
There's no seatbelt. And they say, well, there will be a fine if you get on an elevator and you're petrified to go to your home because there's 6 people in there and 5 are without a mask. Of course,
So
You know,
one practical advice for everyone that I don't, now that we said that, I want anyone to remember this, the most dangerous places to get the virus is obviously congested places, but also elevators especially. There are data that the virus stays in the air in closed spaces for some time. Extremely critical to wear good mask when you're in an elevator. And even worse is bathrooms. There are data that when you flush the toilet, there is aerosols, you know, it creates aerosols, and that brings maybe the virus back on the air.
Don't
So
flush
it's
the
so
toilet, guys, when you go to the bathrooms.
We all have to get diapers now.
Well,
so
you guys,
so wear a good mask and protect yourself in this space. That's a very dangerous.
Let's invest
interaction zone.
in what the seniors wear. And that way we can make some money. One of those diapers, then we can make money for research.
You know, I haven't heard enough about also the asymptomatic transfer. And I think if that was conveyed in a better way to people, they would hear that message. Like, is that real? Like the WHO said 60% of people are asymptomatic. That means they're walking around.
So when we had the meeting Monday with Fauci, I asked him, that was the question I asked him. Every cancer center director was asking him a different thing. I asked him if people who are considered asymptomatic, if he has data, because there are no data, of how many of them become symptomatic and how many of them the virus clears. And his answer, he told me, oh, that's a very good question, but I don't know the answer. He said, they're looking now. They're trying to collect data to understand, are these people really asymptomatic? Or they are people who will become symptomatic, but we just have a long period. It takes a long time. So the fact, though, is that there has been these people transmit the virus. And I think that's recognized right now. And that's the problem. That's why this pandemic got out of control. Because with the flu, we are used to have people transmit the virus usually when they're sick or a day before. With this virus, it could be months. It could be someone who is asymptomatic for months. And that's why, and people were not recommending masks for everyone. So the virus was spreading like fire. So that's what made it so bad, exactly this thing. But we still don't know if these people are really asymptomatic. There are some data that when you do CAT scans in some of them, without any symptoms at all, they have lung damage. You detect interstitial infiltrates. And again, they may be young and strong and not feeling the damage, but down the road, they may feel it. There is a lot of unanswered things right now. You know?
Can I ask you a question?
and now the blood clots.
There's a family of 3, 4, 5 people, for instance, and one gets diagnosed with the COVID. The others don't feel anything. Why is it that one person can get the COVID and the others don't?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One thing, we have done some studies at Northwestern right now. We try to analyze our experience. And if you have a family member with COVID, it's very high chance that everybody will get it. It's 80% so far, the antibody testing, and maybe now it's even higher. So many people get it. In the same house, it's very hard to protect. You need masks within the house, isolation, but then people respond differently. You know, that's the challenge here. Some people will get very sick and die, and some others will have a much milder course. That's how the immune system fights.
Their body becomes immune to it, like you become immune to colds or viruses, and you can just have it and it will pass you by and not feel it at all.
That's a very good question. There is a thing called the microbiome. For those of you who like science, the microbiome is, our GI system, our stomach, there are millions of bacteria there. And the microbiome, the bacteria that we have that live normally in our body, the normal flora, there are data that they affect our immune system. So now there are studies being done to see if the microbiome, there are some countries that did real well. The Greeks did very well, Was that all because Mitsotakis is smart, who I think did a fantastic job, or there was something else with the Greeks? It could be the Italians next door was a disaster, So there are, and this could be some things like this, the microbiome, the immune system. We need to do studies to understand that. This moment we're kind of blinded.
I don't
But
understand.
yeah,
Well, it's like India. They had very little. And
Now, my next question is, Dr. Platanias, since we're all running out of time, as we all know, our biggest fundraiser to support you guys with research is the Hippocratic. Last year, it was so successful that everyone across the country, I can tell you the world, I mean, in London, in Greece, everywhere, people were speaking about what an amazing event and what a great cause and how they're impacting the world with cancer research. We have to be real. I know we said that we will wait until the end of August to make a decision. We have to be very realistic. From what everyone says, and I'm asking people across the country how they're going about events that they're having. None of the events, this 2020 year was blown, we just blew it. That was it. No one is having any events. They're postponing them. Even if it does go up to phase 5, which says 200 people, say that we do send out the invitation, which would not be right just to the big supporters, and say, okay, we're sending, 100 invitations, all we need is 200 people. It will be very unfair. So my thought, and I'd like to hear some of your opinions, everyone, is to do a virtual gala. We can put it together. We can coordinate it in a very, in a beautiful manner where we can have a lot of our new doctors, our old doctors, our scientists, great scientists, and Frank can speak about this great research that he's doing. Hopefully Hippocratic will be able to cure not only cancer and the COVID. I'm giving my fingers crossed. We're all praying for that. And just in hopes of raising money for you guys during this very critical time. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about doing a virtual gala.
Elenia, I have to leave in about 10 minutes. I have another call, but I would say that what I've seen from other organizations as well, as wonderful as it is, can you hear me? Yeah. As wonderful as it is to see everyone, and it's been a fantastic experience. At the end of the day, people are committed to supporting the cause, okay? And the amount of money that they budget every year for contributing to this cause, okay, is pretty much budgeted, and people know what they're going to do. And so I think people, in light of everything else going on, I think that people will turn on. I think people will totally understand, and hopefully the same amount of money will be raised, at least on a net basis. We may not be able to do the live auction and some of the other things that bring a lot of enthusiasm, although you can probably do it remotely as well. But my own view would be, you've got to do it. You can't stop it. The worst thing possible would be not to do it, and do it remotely like so many other people do it. I think is entirely appropriate, and people will totally understand.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support.
I have a friend that is, he's a wizard digitally. He's actually won awards with Nielsen. He's the same one that's helping me with the documentary. And he told me that he's been approached by some major companies, and he's sent them out reports or different ways and proposals that he can connect them digitally if they have like maybe 8-10 people in a room. He's already doing proposals for them for events, for their major events or their yearly event, things like that. Big corporations.
Thank you.
I
Nicole?
would just say I asked my wife for a kiss, and she offered me a virtual kiss, and it wasn't the same damn thing. However, we have to be realistic, and in terms of people's willingness to come to an event if we put it on, and also obviously we want to be responsible in what we do. And I think a virtual event is better than nothing. It will generate some funds, and it might be better to, these virtual events where people just get on a massive Zoom thing aren't very fulfilling. But if we encourage people to have, host private parties in groups of 20 or less, maybe even had some contests for fundraising, but you'd limit it so somebody can't, raise more by virtue of having too many people in the location, that it could be a little bit of a fun, competitive thing. People can come up with their own themes maybe for the parties. We can give out some prizes for that as well as fundraising. And we could do something that people like you and Nicole just, everything you guys touch turns to gold. And, so whatever a virtual event will be, you'll make it the best.
It's all of us. It's all of us, guys. It's a team effort. It's all of us.
Yeah, well, that's what I was talking about. He's doing it, and they're doing different, groups together, in a room, offices and things, and then he's putting them all together on one big thing. And that's what some companies are doing right now, reaching out to somebody who can digitally do that.
Right. Okay.
And he
Right.
I think we're living in a time where everyone's concerned about COVID, but they still care about cancer. I think all of us, I have friends and family that are being touched by cancer every day. And I think we have to keep fighting for them and, helping Dr. Platanias and keeping that momentum going, because we've had it up until now. We've had it throughout the worst times of COVID. And I think we can still, do so with this virtual event because everyone is still being touched by cancer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I make one comment, Eleni? Can I say, first of all, I want to thank Eleni and everyone for thinking of that. And what Nicole said is not that everyone is still get touched by cancer. I think cancer is much worse now because of COVID. Eleni keeps bringing that up and she's absolutely right. We have missed so many diagnoses. Cancer is going this moment unopposed. It has gone for some people unopposed. They didn't go to the doctor. They didn't do the right thing. There is more need than ever. One thing so I appreciate very much the support of doing a virtual event. I think this will be very important for us. One thing we can do beyond, I think Scott's suggestion was a great one. And another thing we can do, we can create a wall on the website. We have people in the country, Kate and Jennifer, they can help with that. We do sometimes for the walk, and people can go and write messages, electronic messages, but they will be all with their pictures, and there can be some sort of, community created with messages, virtual, and people can respond. We can do some things like this to help it,
Dr. Platanias, on the 14th of the month, we are having a meeting at 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
We don't know if you're going to be available. If you're available, we love you to come by.
Okay.
It's going to be at Carmine's in Rosemont.
Okay.
We will be discussing all this. If you can bring your team too. We're going to be discussing how we're going to put it together. We want like 3-4 patients to put wonderful testimonials together.
No problem. Yeah.
All your doctors and Frank, the new doctors that we recruited, and Amanda and everyone. We want them, to give a very inspiring, speech the way they do every year. We want to write great notes, like you said, to the people that have impacted our lives and the people that really made us move toward creating this great foundation for you. Yesterday we went out for dinner with some friends and I was extremely touched when I said, we're not having a gala, because they asked me, they said, so are you having the gala? We're going to buy a few tables. And I said, no, actually, I said, we're not, because we're limited to 200 people. And who do you invite? You don't want to exclude people. I mean, last year we had over 1,100 people. And this year we were aiming for 1,500 people. Okay, things went wrong. It's okay. And and as we're walking out, I said, I hope you will support it. He goes, absolutely. He goes, how much, he goes, do we give every year? And I said, I think 25,000. He goes, of course, absolutely, we will give that. And I got in the car and I was in tears, and I go to Jimmy, I can't believe it. And he goes to me, why? He goes, if you believe in a cause. And I go, good, then I expect 50,000 from you. He goes, well, isn't that what I'm committed every year to doing? And so you know what? And then I was at a breakfast this morning, and I got to a young lady. I said, you know, I said, we're not having the gala, and you know, you do commit every year. She goes, well, I'll commit to 50,000. And that really, I mean, it touched me so much. And I said, why? I said, let me ask you a question. I go, why did you just right away say, I'll commit to that? She goes to me, because she goes, a couple of young people were diagnosed and they did not go to a doctor. Exactly what we said. They felt something, did not go to a doctor from the fear of COVID. That's why this freaking COVID, and I'm sorry that I'm speaking like this, has gotten me so upset, because young women were feeling things and did not go to a doctor because of COVID. So like Jimmy said, when people believe in a cause and they have been touched by cancer, and what Nicole said, I think that people are going to react to our appeal.
Eleni, you know,
Yeah.
our gala stops, but hearts don't stop. People's hearts are still open.
Yes. Thank you.
That's
Thank
what we need to believe. And that's how we move forward.
Everybody's touched. You know, the way, you know, everybody, like a friend of mine says to me, well, she goes, and I was telling her, I said, oh my God, I go, you know, so-and-so people, you know, they're committed to giving, you know, this much money. And she goes, well, the way she goes, they all pick up the phone. It was really cute when she said that. She goes, well, they all pick up the freaking phone and they go, can you please contact Dr. Platanias? Because my daughter or my brother or my husband or whatever was diagnosed with cancer. And the way he responds immediately, no matter where he is and what time it is, you know what, they should respond to him, that he's trying to make a difference in people's lives. And you know what, that made me, it was, and as all of you know, I'm a very emotional person. And I was literally in tears again. And I go, you know what, that's so nice of people to see things like that. She goes, well, they all pick up the phone and they call you, and then you pass them on to Dr. Platanias. So she goes, what's wrong, she goes, with them really reacting the way that they should? And it doesn't matter, she goes, what
Everybody,
they give.
Hi.
I have to leave, so.
Bye, Jimmy, and God be with you.
Right. Thank you, Tim.
God
Thank
be-
you.
So with that, let's all pray that we will make a difference
We'll be fine.
and we'll be fine.
There's one thing we need, though, to make this phone call complete. I haven't seen Jimmy come by and give you a kiss.
Actually, he's waving at me and he's like, we're gonna be late for our dinner with our friends.
Well, if he
Eleni,
comes by and
before-
gives you a kiss, we can end the call, tell him.
Yeah. But a virtual
Eleni,
kiss is not
before-
enough.
Bravo, thank you.
Before
Okay.
we hang up, I don't want to forget the other thing we discussed about the timing of the next meeting. Do you want me to say, or you want to say
Yes, you can
something?
say, go ahead.
So we were thinking that because there is some international audience, we can invite through Zoom, especially from Europe, I guess, Greece, maybe Serbia, right, or London, and there are some people there.
Yeah.
To move the time of the meeting, and we will need to move the day to do it around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Will that work for people, or the next meeting, or?
And a Wednesday we said?
Yeah, I was gonna check again, probably Wednesday or Friday.
Yeah, because Queen Catherine would like to join us. And I know Katerina would like to join us and Stella wanted to join us, but it's very late in London and in Greece and in Serbia and everywhere. So they were all wondering if maybe we can change the time. Nicole, what do you think?
Sorry,
I'd like you to join us.
Thursday, the 16th at 1, is that what you're?
No, in
Wednesday
2
or
weeks,
Friday,
on a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
possibly the 15th or the 17th.
16th at 1, you said?
In 2 weeks, on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
Oh, no, I cannot that, Eleni. I'm just looking in my schedule. I cannot, but I can, hold on a second. I can do Thursday at 1 o'clock. Yeah, I will be. So
Don't
let's do
forget-
it
Don't forget
Thursday.
that Thursday in Europe, all the events take place on Thursdays. So we're
So how
not,
about Friday? Can we do it Friday at 1
no,
o'clock?
it would have to be there Tuesday or Wednesday, where I know that there's no events, you know. Big
How about
event.
Tuesday, the 14th?
Can you do Tuesday, Dr. Platanias?
The
We
14th is
have the
luncheon.
executive
Our meeting.
committee of the cancer center. How about Thursday? Can we do it Thursday? No? 1 o'clock?
Thursday, I don't think we're gonna get enough people unless we do it at
In
Following
2
week.
weeks,
The following,
11, unless we do it at 11 o'clock, where you will put them at 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock before they go to their parties, their socializing.
How about if we do it on Tuesday at 11 o'clock? That works for me.
That's the meeting date,
in 2
14th.
weeks, Tuesday, it's 14th.
Yeah.
That's Tuesday, the 14th, Dr. Platanias, that we have the event. with that.
How about the 15th then, but we'll do it at 11 o'clock? Will that work?
The 15th is a Wednesday at 11
Yeah.
o'clock. Nicole, guys,
Yeah.
at work?
You like
All
it? Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
There
Do
be
we
a
have
special
another deal?
dress code because we have a queen?
No, there's no special dress code.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will coordinate with Katina to send them the emails in Europe and ask them that we would like them to invite them. And then we'll get Mr. Martinez too, or his wife, if they would like to join us.
And can I just make a positive comment? Last night on ABC News, there was a wonderful piece about Northwestern and all the research, and they're about to do new research for COVID. I believe it was with plasma testing.
Yeah, we do a
It
lot
was
of
a very
that.
nice piece and an extensive piece.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, all right. Is there anything else? Dr. Frank, Dr. Platanias, thank you so much. Frank.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Work 24/7, please.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
Have a safe and nice holiday. Stay safe, please. Everybody have a nice holiday.
Happy
Thank
4th.
you. Same for you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be
Happy
safe,
holiday.
everybody. We love you
Stay
guys.
safe, everyone.
Be safe.
You
God
Thank
be-
you again for everything.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nicole. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.